I always thought I was a good husband. I wasn't perfect, of course. Who is? But I believed I did enough to keep my marriage strong. I worked hard, provided for us, and always made sure the bills were paid. It didn't matter if that meant long hours or constant travel. It was all for her, for us. Or so I thought. My wife, Emma, had been patient with me for years. In the early days of our marriage, she would smile when I came home late, pulling me into a warm hug and telling me I was working too hard. She'd laugh at my stories from the office, listen as I vented about difficult clients, and remind me to take breaks when I pushed myself too far. But over time, things started to change. The smiles became less frequent. The hugs grew shorter. Our conversations turned into polite exchanges about groceries or bills, and the warmth I used to feel from her began to fade. I told myself it was just a rough patch. All couples go through phases, right? What I didn't realize was that while I was busy focusing on work, she had started to drift away. It wasn't just the little things that changed. It was her. She started going out more often, dressing up in a way she hadn't in years. She stopped asking about my day, stopped waiting up for me when I worked late. Emma used to leave her phone lying around, forgotten on the kitchen counter or the nightstand, but now it was always with her, the screen face down whenever she set it down. I tried to ignore it at first. I didn't want to seem paranoid, and besides, I trusted her. But the doubt started creeping in, slowly at first, until it became impossible to ignore. The first crack appeared one Friday night. I came home earlier than usual, hoping to surprise her with takeout from her favorite restaurant. She was sitting in the living room, her phone in her hand, staring out the window. "Hey," I said, setting the bags down on the counter. "Got us something special tonight? Your favorite." She looked up, startled, and quickly set her phone down. "Oh, that's nice," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. As we ate, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She barely touched her food. Her answers to my questions were short, and she seemed distracted, like she was a million miles away. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just tired," she said, avoiding my gaze. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. A few weeks later, I found the receipt. I wasn't looking for anything, but as I grabbed her coat from the back of a chair, a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. I picked it up, curious, and froze when I saw what it was. A receipt from the Lotus Hotel, dated one of the nights I'd been away on a business trip. She sat down, and we had a blissful silence. At first, I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe she went there for coffee, or maybe it was from a work meeting. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, the doubt gnawed at me. That evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I decided to confront her. "Hey, I found something interesting today," I said, holding up the receipt. "Were you at the Lotus Hotel recently?" She glanced at the paper, her expression carefully neutral. "Oh, yeah," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I had a meeting there. One of my clients prefers hotels for their meetings." "At a hotel?" "It's more professional," she said, her tone light. "You know how some people are." I wanted to believe her. Her explanation made sense, and I didn't have any real reason to doubt her, except for that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. As the weeks went by, that feeling only grew stronger. She started staying out later, always with a vague excuse about work or friends. She'd laugh at texts on her phone, but when I asked what was funny, she'd just say, "Oh, nothing, just something silly from a friend." I tried to tell myself it was all in my head. After all, I was busy too, working late nights, traveling for meetings. Maybe we were just going through a rough patch. But then there was the night I came home late and found her on the phone. I walked into the living room, dropping my bag by the door. She didn't hear me at first, too absorbed in her conversation. "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow," she said, her voice soft and warm. When she noticed me, she quickly hung up. "Who was that?" I asked, my chest tightening. "Just a friend," she said, standing up and heading for the kitchen. "What friend?" "You don't know her," she said, brushing past me. She needed advice about something. "Huh?" I didn't press her. I wanted to believe her. But deep down, I knew. The confirmation came one afternoon when her phone buzzed while charging on the counter. I wasn't snooping, but the preview flashed across the screen before I could look away. "Can't wait to see you tonight." My heart sank. When she walked into the room, I confronted her. "Who's texting you?" I asked, holding up her phone. She froze, her eyes darting to the screen. "It's just a friend," she said, her voice tight. "A friend who can't wait to see you tonight?" "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "Then tell me what it is," I said, my voice trembling. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, finally, she sighed. "We've been talking," she admitted. "But it's nothing serious, just someone to talk to." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. "Someone to talk to?" I repeated. "Why couldn't you talk to me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because you're never here," she said. "And when you are, it's like you're not really there. You're always thinking about work, always on your phone or your laptop. I feel like I'm invisible." She paused and paused. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Over the next few days, we talked, or tried to. She told me about the man she'd met, how he made her feel seen and appreciated. She swore nothing physical had happened, but the way she spoke about him made it clear how much he meant to her. "You don't understand," she said one night, her voice breaking. "He listens to me. He makes me feel alive." "And what am I?" I asked bitterly. "A paycheck? A stranger?" She didn't answer. A week later, I came home to find the house eerily quiet. On the kitchen table, there was a letter, and it was from Oxytocin. "I'm sorry," it began. "I never meant to hurt you, but I can't keep living this way. I've decided to leave. I hope one day you can forgive me." I stood there for what felt like hours, rereading the words until they blurred together. She was gone. It's been a year since that day. At first, I tried to bury myself in work, but no amount of success could fill the void she left behind. I kept replaying our last conversations in my head, wondering if I could have done something differently. But over time, I began to heal. I focused on myself, on rebuilding my life piece by piece. I found solace in friends, in hobbies I'd long forgotten, and in the realization that I couldn't change the past. I don't know where she is now, and I don't want to. Truth, all I know is that the man I was back then, the man who took her for granted, no longer exists. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that love isn't just about providing or protecting. It's about being present. Story 2. I still don't know why I let my father back into my life. Perhaps it was guilt, or maybe a morbid curiosity to see what he'd become after 20 years of absence. He stood on my doorstep that summer evening, a bottle of whiskey in one hand, his posture confident, as if nothing had ever happened. "James," he said, his voice calm and familiar. "You're not going to leave your old man out here, are you?" "James." I stared at him, speechless. My first instinct was to slam the door, but before I could move, Elena appeared behind me. She looked at him, her dark eyes lighting up with warmth. "Michael," she exclaimed. "It's so nice to see you. Come in, come in." She welcomed him as though he hadn't walked out on me and my mother when I was 6, as though his 20 years' silence could be forgiven over a shared drink. Reluctantly, I stepped aside, watching as he strolled into my home, his eyes scanning the room like he already belonged there. Michael had a way of commanding attention. Within weeks, he'd woven himself into the fabric of our lives, charming Elena with his quick wit and magnetic personality. She was captivated by his stories of distant places and daring exploits, laughing at his jokes and encouraging his company. "You're just like him, you know," she said to me one evening after he left. I froze, the words stinging more than I cared to admit. "Don't compare me to him." She sighed, setting her wine glass on the counter. "He's trying, James. Can't you at least meet him halfway?" "Etienne," he said. "Trying to do what? Rewrite history?" I shot back. "You carry so much anger," she said softly. "Maybe it's time to let it go." But how could I? The man had walked away without a word, leaving my mother to struggle alone. And now, after 2 decades, he thought he could waltz back into my life with no questions asked? Surely not. Elena was always one to see the good in people, even when it wasn't there. That was part of why I fell for her. I met her in Moscow, during my brief stint working abroad. She was an architect, fiercely ambitious and breathtakingly beautiful. Her passion for life was infectious. Her life, a sound I never grew tired of. When we married and moved back to England, I'd thought I'd won the lottery. She made everything feel brighter, more alive. But lately she'd changed. She started coming home late, claiming work deadlines or last-minute client meetings. She bought a new perfume, musky and alluring, unlike anything she'd worn before. And there were times when I'd catch her staring at her phone, smiling at a message I couldn't see. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. She was busy, that was all. But then, I found the receipt. It was folded neatly in the pocket of her coat, the name of a boutique hotel printed at the top. The date matched one of her late nights. My hands trembled as I held it, the implications sinking in like a stone. When I confronted her, she was calm, almost dismissive. "It's just a meeting place," she said, her voice steady. "Some clients prefer neutral spaces." "At a hotel?" I pressed, my suspicion barely masked. "Yes, James," she replied, exasperated. "I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this." "Yes, but—" Her explanation was plausible, but her tone felt rehearsed, too smooth. It wasn't long before I started noticing the subtler signs. The way she lingered when Michael was around, her laughter softer, but more frequent. The way he touched her arm during a joke, casual, yet familiar. And then there were the glances. Quick, almost imperceptible, but heavy with meaning. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it was nothing, but the doubt gnawed at me, relentless. One evening, as we were clearing the table after dinner, I decided to test the waters. "You and my father seem close," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Elena paused, looking at me over her shoulder. "What are you trying to say?" "Nothing," I said quickly, though my heart raced. "Just an observation." She turned back to the sink, her movements slower, more deliberate. "He's your father, James. Maybe you should focus on fixing that relationship instead of looking for problems where there aren't any." The breaking point came at a dinner Michael hosted. He insisted on having us over, promising a night to remember. Elena arrived late, her cheeks flushed as she slipped off her coat. Michael greeted her with his usual charm, pouring her a glass of wine and pulling out a chair. Throughout the evening, their interactions grated on me. The way she laughed at his jokes, the way he leaned in when he spoke to her. It all felt wrong. At one point, his hand brushed hers, and she didn't pull away. On the drive home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Are you and my father involved?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Elena stared at me, her face pale. "What? James, how could you even think that?" "Because the signs are all there," I snapped. "The late nights, the hotel receipt, the way he looks at you. Don't tell me I'm imagining it." Her silence was deafening. The next morning, I confronted Michael. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I asked, my tone sharp. He leaned against the counter, his expression unreadable. "What are you accusing me of, son?" "Don't play dumb," I spat. "What's going on between you and Helena?" Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's a remarkable woman," he said quietly. My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" "She needed someone to talk to," he continued. "Someone who noticed her. Maybe if you'd paid more attention." I didn't let him finish. My fist collided with the wall, the pain sharp but satisfying. Michael left town a week later, disappearing as suddenly as he had arrived. Elena swore nothing had happened, begged me to believe her. But the damage was done. I couldn't look at her without seeing betrayal, couldn't hear her laugh without thinking of him. Now, as I sit alone in the house we once filled with love, I think about what Michael said. Family is like a pair of shoes. If they don't fit, you throw them out. Maybe he was right. Some bonds are better left broken. But